Have you ever wondered how one event could change the world forever? Well, there's one such event that undeniably altered the course of history. World War I, or as it was known then, the Great War. The Great War, an event of such magnitude, it's hard to fathom. It was one of the deadliest conflicts in history. A war so vast, so devastating, that it claimed the lives of an estimated 9 million combatants. But the toll didn't stop there. An additional 7 million civilians, people just like you and me, were caught in this storm of violence and lost their lives. These numbers are not mere statistics. They represent fathers, sons, mothers, and daughters. Each one a story cut short, a life abruptly ended. World War I was not an overnight event. It wasn't a war that sprang up out of nowhere. It spanned over 4 years, from July 28, 1914 to November 11, 1918. 4 long, grueling years that saw the world map redrawn, empires toppled, and societies forever changed. This was a time when the world experienced warfare on a scale never seen before. It was an era of trenches and gas attacks, of dogfights in the sky and U-boats beneath the sea. It was a war that showcased the terrifying potential of human ingenuity when turned towards destruction. The world before the Great War and the world after were starkly different. The war left deep scars, not just on the land, but on the psyche of the nations involved. It changed the way we thought about war, about ourselves, and about what we, as a species, are capable of. But how did it all start? How did the world find itself embroiled in such a deadly conflict? What were the causes that led to this catastrophic war? It's time to delve deeper into the annals of history and find out. Now, let's dive into the causes that led to this catastrophic war. What could have possibly led to such a massive global conflict, you might ask? Well, there were a handful of key factors that contributed to the onset of World War I, and they can be summed up with 4 words: militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. Militarism, for starters, was a significant cause. As countries around the world began to build up their military forces in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, it created an environment of fear and suspicion. It was an arms race, with each nation wanting to outdo the others in terms of military might. Next, we have alliances. These were agreements between countries to support each other in times of war. While they were meant to promote peace, they actually contributed to the war. When one country was threatened, their allies felt obligated to jump in and assist, which led to a chain reaction of involvement from various nations. Imperialism, the third cause, refers to the policy of extending a country's power and influence through colonization, use of military force, or other means. This led to competition and conflict between the powers, especially in Africa and Asia, as they vied for resources and strategic advantages. Finally, there's nationalism. This is the belief that your own nation is superior to others. It can spur a country to greatness, but it can also lead to conflict. In the case of World War I, nationalism stoked tensions, especially in areas like the Balkans, where different nationalities were vying for independence or dominance. And then, amid these simmering tensions, came the event that lit the fuse: the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary. In June of 1914, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne was killed by a Serbian nationalist. This event led Austria-Hungary to declare war on Serbia, and due to the complicated web of alliances, other countries were drawn into the conflict. This assassination set in motion a series of events that would lead to the start of World War I. Who were the main players in this deadly game of war? Let's delve into that. World War I saw a clash of titans, a battle between 2 major alliances that would forever change the course of history. On one side, we had the Central Powers. This alliance was a formidable quartet, comprised of Germany, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire. Germany, the powerhouse of Europe, was a force to be reckoned with on the battlefield. With its military might and industrial strength, it was a formidable foe. Austria-Hungary, although struggling with internal divisions, held a strategic position in Central Europe. Bulgaria, the smallest of the Central Powers, was nonetheless a vital ally, providing a crucial link to the Ottoman Empire. And speaking of the Ottomans, despite being in decline, they were still a significant player, controlling vital trade routes and providing a bridge between Europe and Asia. On the other side of the conflict, we had the Allies. This alliance brought together some of the world's most powerful nations. France, with its fierce patriotism and formidable military, was a key player. Russia, despite its internal turmoil, brought sheer numbers and a vast geographical expanse to the table. The United Kingdom, with its global empire and naval supremacy, played a vital role in the war. Italy, initially a member of the Central Powers, switched sides to join the Allies in 1915. Japan, a rising power in the East, also aligned with the Allies, seeking to expand its influence. And last but not least, the United States. It entered the war in 1917, tipping the scales in favor of the Allies with its vast resources and fresh troops. So, there you have it, the major combatants of World War I. These nations, each with their own strengths and weaknesses, their own hopes and fears, their own dreams and nightmares. They were drawn into a conflict that was larger than any of them. A conflict that would reshape the world as we know it. These nations would engage in a brutal and bloody battle that would last for over 4 years. What was life like on the front lines of this global conflict? Imagine a world where the ground beneath your feet is constantly shifting, where the air is filled with the deafening sound of artillery fire, and the threat of death is ever present. This was the reality of life on the front lines during World War I. One of the defining features of this war was the extensive use of trench warfare. Soldiers spent months, even years, living in these deep, narrow trenches, facing harsh conditions. Rain often turned the trenches into muddy traps, while rats, lice, and diseases were constant companions. The introduction of new weapons heightened the fear and chaos. The tank, a formidable presence on the battlefield, was introduced during this war. Encased in steel, these vehicles could cross difficult terrain and break through enemy lines, changing the dynamics of ground warfare. The sky wasn't a refuge either. Airplanes, a relatively new invention, were quickly adapted for war. They were used for reconnaissance and, as the war progressed, for bombing raids, adding a new dimension to the battlefield. Perhaps the most feared weapon of all was chemical gas. First used by the Germans at the Second Battle of Ypres, these gases could cause blindness, severe burns, and death. The terror they instilled was as potent as their physical effects. Let's delve into some of the major battles. The Battle of the Somme was one of the largest of the war, lasting 5 months and resulting in over 1 million casualties. It epitomized the futility and brutality of trench warfare. Then there was the Battle of Verdun, the longest single battle of the war. For 10 months, French and German forces clashed in a deadly dance, each trying to bleed the other dry. The human cost was staggering, with hundreds of thousands of lives lost on both sides. The war was a deadly grind, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. This statement encapsulates the reality of World War I on the front lines, a conflict marked by terrifying new weapons, relentless battles, and a grim determination to endure. How did this devastating war finally come to an end, you might ask? Let's dive right in and explore this pivotal moment in history. As the years of the war dragged on, the entry of a new player in 1917 added a fresh dynamic to the battlefield. The United States, previously maintaining a stance of neutrality, joined the Allies, tipping the balance of power in their favor. The infusion of American troops and resources reinvigorated the Allies, giving them the much-needed boost to carry on the fight. Fast forward to 1919, the guns finally fell silent with the signing of the Treaty of Versailles. This wasn't just a simple ceasefire, this was an official stamp marking the end of a war that had ravaged the world for over 4 long years. The treaty held Germany responsible for the war and imposed heavy penalties, stirring resentment that would later feed into the flames of another devastating conflict. Now, the end of the war didn't mean the end of its impact. Quite the contrary. The aftermath of the war was just as significant, if not more so, as the war itself. The world map was redrawn, with national borders shifting like pieces on a chessboard. Empires crumbled while new nations emerged, forever altering the global landscape. More importantly, the seeds for a Second World War were unwittingly sown in the ashes of the First. The punitive terms of the Treaty of Versailles, coupled with the economic hardship that followed, created an environment rife with resentment and a desire for revenge, particularly in Germany. These factors set the stage for the rise of fascism and the outbreak of World War II, barely 2 decades later. The Great War left a lasting legacy on the world, one that still resonates today. Its echoes can be heard in our history, our politics, and our collective consciousness. It serves as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of global conflict and the enduring importance of striving for peace.